What is going on, everybody? My name is TAETRO and welcome back to this monthly series we've been doing focusing on music theory topics. These are theory topics that are hopefully presented in a very accessible way for music producers specifically, kind of cutting out all of the extra complicated stuff that usually comes along with music theory and focusing on some of the more practical principles, things that can get you up and running and you can start applying to your music today. Now, we have done several chapters of this throughout the past few months. We've covered things like the basic major scale formula, how to make chord progressions, ear training, different things like that. And I posed a question to you all a couple videos back, ear training or rhythm, and it was pretty split. So we already did the ear training video, and today we're going to focus on rhythm, which is a pretty significant gear switch from the previous few videos. I think you'll actually enjoy this if you started to get a little bit of a headache with all of the previous topics. So if you want to know the very basics of rhythm and understanding like what goes into creating rhythm, it affects not only your drums, but it also affects your melodies and your chord progressions. Pretty much every part of your music involves rhythm in some way. This is the video for you. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. I have a little bit of a watercolor painting update to show you all, but we'll talk about that later. And for now, let's get into the basics of rhythm. All right, so it's worth noting that I'm using Ableton Live today, but it does not really matter. The DAW doesn't matter. I'm just going to use this to show you different types of rhythms. And most DAWs have a type of workflow like this, but just follow along and I think you'll start to understand what I mean. The very first concept we have to understand is beats per minute. That is the tempo of your track. And for today's example, we're going to say that the track is only one tempo. Sometimes tracks can change tempo, but that's a little more complicated. So if I turn on my metronome and I hit play, I'm going to hear a click track. This is my tempo. My tempo is set to 170, which is quite fast. I'm actually going to switch the sound of this really quick so it's easier to hear. There we go. And you notice that there is one high pitch click and 3 lower pitch clicks. The one at the beginning is higher pitch to signify our downbeat. That is very important. That's our downbeat, and the 3 beats that follow are slightly lower pitch. Now, we are also going to work in the most common time signature 4/4. Songs can be in other time signatures, but again, too complicated for today. We'll talk about that in a later video, possibly. So you hear 4 beats, one has emphasis because it's the downbeat, and the other 3 are just normal beats. The way we represent that is actually like this picture right here, this grid. We see 1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Those are our strong beats. So if I actually press play on this clip, you'll see the line go through along with the metronome. You notice that every time the playhead crosses one of those major lines, it clicks. Let's go at a slower beats per minute just for today's example. I'm going to bring it down all the way to 80 beats per minute. Why does this say 1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4 instead of just 1, 2, 3, and 4? Well, that's because this right here, this little clip here, is a 1-bar phrase. It is only 1 bar. And in this time signature 4/4, the most common time signature, bars are made up of 4 beats. So this is bar 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. If this was a 2-bar phrase, then you see how this changes. It's twice as long now, and we have bar 1 with beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And we have bar 2, beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's just evenly divided there. You notice you hear that downbeat right here. So the downbeat is the first beat of every bar. Let's actually put a kick drum on the downbeat there. And it cycles through just like that. You'll notice that it's just evenly divided. Each bar is divided evenly into 4 parts, and that actually, as you see as we go through here, there's other lines dividing each beat. These beats can be subdivided, and that sounds kind of overly complicated, but it's not really. So for now, let's just take what we know about bars and beats, and let's just lay down a very basic rhythm. I'm going to put kicks on every other beat, And then I'm going to put snare on the beats that we skipped. So snares are going on 2 and 4, kicks are going on 1 and 3. Notice how I'm referring to these. I'm going to say snare is going on beat 2 and 4 because it's the same in bar 1 as it is in bar 2. Kick is going on beats 1 and 3, same in bar 1, same in bar 2. That, of course, sounds like this. And you'll notice that's playing exactly with the metronome because it's lining up perfectly with time. Let me turn the metronome off. And the reason this sounds just so steady and even is because it is completely steady and completely even. It's this block of sound divided completely evenly with kicks and snares. And we get a nice steady rhythm. But what did I just say before? Subdivision. We aren't just locked in to these singular beats. You can see there's little lines hidden there dividing up these beats into even smaller increments. And we're going to have to find a way to talk about these increments. And it's pretty easy to understand if you understand fractions, which I can't say I fully do. But anyway, I'm just going to take these notes, and this doesn't change anything about what we talked about, but I'm going to make them the full length they can possibly be. Let's go back to doing a 1-bar pattern actually. And you notice that since the beat is divided into 4 pieces, well, what should we call that in fraction form? We're going to call that a quarter note. Each beat takes up 1/4 of the bar. And you'll notice here, in Ableton Live specifically, the numbers are going to get a little complicated, but I recommend you don't really pay attention to these decimal points other than the strong beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. Instead, we're just going to know that if we divide a quarter note in half, if we fit 2 notes where there's normally 1 quarter note, we're going to call that an 1/8 note. We can fit twice as many. And what I'm fitting in here right now are some hi-hats. So let's hear what that sounds like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, I'm going to solo the hi-hat so we can strictly focus on it. Notice how I count it using ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But I'm still counting those strong beats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is just kind of like a simple way to count these beats in a way that still lines up with our grid. We're still calling out the strong beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, but we're finding a way to fit in between there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you can hear that they play very well with this very steady rhythm. Again, why is that? Because everything is divided super cleanly and evenly. Even though the kick and the snare are playing these clean quarter notes, the 1/8 notes are going at a steady pace, just there's twice as many of them per beat. And we can keep going down the rabbit hole. I'm going to change my grid size now to 1/16, which is half of that. So let's go ahead and actually shorten our hi-hat notes. And now we're going to have 16th note hi-hats instead of 1/8 note hi-hats. What do you notice there? Well, there are now 4 hi-hat hits for every 1 beat. These are 16th notes. And as you might have calculated already, there are 16 of these 16th notes in a bar, just like there are 4 quarter notes in a bar, just like there are 8 1/8 notes in a bar. It kind of makes sense as a system, right? It's like math that actually makes sense. It's crazy. So this sounds like this. You hear we have that faster paced hi-hat, but I'm using the word faster and maybe that's a little confusing. Notice how we're subdividing time. Again, there's that word again, subdividing, but we're never changing the tempo. The overall pace and tempo of the song does not change. Instead, we're working within the confines of our beats per minute of our tempo, and we're just dividing it evenly to get different feels. There's no doubt that having the hi-hats play 16th notes is much different than having the hi-hats just play 1/8 notes. We are creating a faster feel without actually changing the tempo. That is one of the key takeaways here, is if you hear a song that is the same tempo throughout, but feels like it changes pace or feels like it speeds up or feels like the energy changes at some point, maybe it gets higher, the energy grows, that's probably because they're doing something rhythmically to add energy, like subdividing even more. This is really basic example here using 3 like main core drum elements, right? Using the kick and snare as quarter notes and the hi-hat as 16th notes. But once you understand this grid, things start to get interesting. So what if now, instead of having the kick just play quarter notes, what if we added a couple of 16th notes in here? And let's actually do it like that. So let's hear the bounce that this adds to this one bar. This probably sounds a little familiar. Adding that kick 16th notes adds a little bit of bounce to it. We might even be able to add a 16th note here in the snare. And suddenly we have, again, a rhythm that you've probably heard before in some beats, but hopefully now you can kind of understand how to achieve it. And that's the whole point of this series, so that you're starting to hear the music that you love and being able to transfer it into your own music and to understand actually what's going on. So now you're listening back to drums and rhythms, and hopefully you're understanding, okay, what changed here? The hi-hats got faster, but the tempo didn't change. Oh, it probably went from playing 8ths to 16ths. Or let's subdivide one more time just so you can see how granular we can get. And we can go even deeper than this, by the way, but this is just for today's example. I just changed the grid to 30-second notes. Now, if you see the pattern we're going in, quarter notes, 8th notes, 16ths, 30 seconds. And if we kept going, you'd have 64ths. But right now our grid is in 30-second notes, which is really fast rate. I'm going to go ahead and add some hi-hat stutters, which we are probably used to hearing in something like trap music. If I shrink some of these 16th notes, I'm obviously just cutting them in half so I can make room for another note. I can add in these 30-second notes, which will ultimately act almost like a stutter. And lots of trap really does take this to the extreme, and we can actually go even more narrow. And I'm just gonna change my grid to adaptive so that I can zoom in and make it even more narrow. I'm gonna cut those 30-second notes in half and make 64ths like we already talked about, just for that end there. We'll get a little bit of a roll. And now this is sounding familiar, hopefully. So, very easy to understand. The bar of music that you're working in is divided into equal parts, and the most basic version of that is dividing into 4. We could have quarter notes. And actually, it can be divided just as a whole note which takes up an entire bar. Doesn't that make sense? Whole note takes up the whole bar. Or you could even have something like a half note, which takes up half a bar. And that's going to matter more when we talk about how rhythm affects things like your melodies and chord progressions. But let's do that after I show you real quick my latest paintings and we talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare has thousands of inspiring classes in art, music production, business, video production, and more. And today, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of the Skillshare Premium membership. And with the Skillshare Premium membership, you get access to all of the classes on Skillshare. As you all know, I took this course and tried to learn a new hobby, watercolor painting. And it's actually been going quite well. I'll give you a little bit of a painting update. Maybe you caught the live stream, but I've been doing lots of landscapes lately. Been having a lot of fun doing that. And it's great to have a hobby that is outside of your main art form. So Skillshare is full of classes where you can pick a new one, like watercolor painting, which I highly recommend for all you music producers out there. That's the painting I did on the stream. But yeah, if you just want to actually dig deeper into some of these music theory concepts, they've actually got music theory taught by an Ableton certified trainer within the context of Ableton Live, which is perfect for a lot of you out there. So check that one out for sure. And one class I can highly recommend is Young Guru's How to Mix Your Music. It was really, really helpful for me in getting my music to sound more professional, get cleaner sounding mixes and things like that. So remember, when you support the sponsor, you support the channel. So use that link in the description. Take advantage of the free trial of the Skillshare Premium membership. And let's get back into talking about rhythm. All right, so we talked about basic subdivision of rhythm when it comes to drums, but like I said at the beginning, rhythm affects all facets of your music, including your melodies and your chord progressions. So let's take a look at that and let's further explain rhythm in this context. I'm gonna leave this beat that we already have. Maybe I'll make it a little lo-fi, just roll off some highs. Great. And let's actually create a melody. And today I'm going to do this by just clicking in notes, and I can actually set my scale here. And let's set it to D major for now. You all already know how to find a D major scale using the whole, whole, half formula, which if you don't know that, you should check out part 1 of this series. But anyway, just showing this in scale mode, we're working in D major. Now my grid is still divided into a lot of pieces. So let me actually just go back to dividing it just by quarter notes. So if we were creating a melody, remember this is 1 bar long. We would actually probably want it to be more than 1 bar, but let's just do a certain melody. I'm just gonna click in random notes like this. It's just quarter notes. It's actually not bad, but it's pretty basic and it's pretty short. So I'm actually gonna duplicate this. So now that it's 2 bars, and that might even be a bit odd. So let's, for this purpose, make a 4 bar melody. Notice that we're working in 4 again. And usually in a lot of the music that we listen to, 4 bars, 8 bars, that is generally how we divide things in terms of bar length. We already talked about beat length and how to subdivide a single bar, but now we're talking about full phrases, and the amount of bars that make up your phrase actually matters a lot as well. So with a 4 bar melody here, we might want to add, a couple differences here. Let's just change up a couple of the notes. I'm gonna repeat that there. And again, we are using just quarter notes. Let's not make this too complicated. That sounded pretty bad. We'll go there. All right, so it's a quarter note melody, but it's kind of boring. And I hear this a lot when folks submit music for track reviews and they're just starting out. We can use rhythm to spice up these melodies, and it's very similar to what we did with the drums. Let's go ahead and change our grid to just 1/8 notes now. And we can use space to our advantage. So it's not always about adding notes on a subdivision, but sometimes it's about having notes be shorter than 1 length throughout a whole melody. So instead of adding a note here, we can keep that short. And that's actually not so bad. I'm going to change up some notes here. And let's actually workshop this melody a little bit so it's not so cringe. All right, I think this is a bit better now. So what changes did we make using rhythm? We went from having an all quarter note melody to now adding in some 1/8 notes to switch up the rhythm. And here on this note, we didn't actually add a note. We instead shortened a note to only be an 1/8 note length and leaving space, which also affects the rhythm. And there we switched up the rhythm to be quarter note, 1/8 note, 1/8 note, quarter note, which again makes the melody more interesting. And let's just bring that down an octave. And maybe for the end here, similar to how we did hi-hat rolls, we could actually create a little run-up with 16th notes. I think this is actually going to sound pretty interesting. I don't know if it's exactly what we're going for, but let's try it. That little run is interesting. And I think one thing that's important when it comes to rhythm, and you are doing this with your melodies, is to actually make things thematic. Let's put a little 16th on every strong beat. All right, so I've actually just put a D here on every strong beat, on the 1, 2, 3, and 4 in every single bar. And now we have this 4-bar melody, which kind of has multiple parts. It's got that steady rhythm on top and the switch between quarters, eighths, and sixteenths in the main melody. And I just want to demonstrate something. With that steady note on top, what would actually happen if we moved that to be on the off beats? So this is very on beat with that D, but let's move that over so it lands in the middle of each beat instead of on each beat, just like that. So you can see that we're directly in the middle of each beat. You notice that it creates a different feel. So that's another example of ways we can use rhythm. And we can do this not only in melody, but in the drums as well, but using things that are on the off beats instead of landing right on a strong beat in our grid. It all changes the way we feel and move to the song. And lastly, let's talk about chord progressions. I'm gonna make a new musical idea here, and I am gonna make it 4 bars long. Again, I'm focusing in on doing a 4-bar long rhythm because 1 bar isn't that long enough to play a chord progression. 2 bars is kind of odd, it's kind of too short. 3 bars is not even, 4 bars is nice and even. We're gonna recognize that as a full phrase. So the most basic thing we could do here is just play 1 chord per bar, right? So there we have 1 chord per bar. It's a very, very basic chord progression. It's a very, very basic rhythm. And you'll notice that I didn't hold the notes out all the way, but let's just make all these notes legato, meaning that the note goes until the next note starts. And they're exactly that long. So each of these notes are actually playing whole notes because they are stretched throughout an entire bar. So throughout the whole thing, we have whole notes, whole notes, whole notes, and then right here at the end, we actually have a half note because it takes up half a bar. Well, what would happen if we took this chord and we made it play quarter notes instead? So remember, quarter notes means we divide the bar into 4 pieces and it lands once on every beat. It's actually a little bit difficult to hear. Let's shorten these. So they're still playing on each beat, but they're a little bit shorter. You notice we get a different rhythm there. We could even double this probably. And again, let's shorten it so they're in half so they sound nice and short. Now, hopefully you will recognize what kind of notes those are. But if there were 4 before, and now there's 8, these are eighth notes. There are 8 of them in the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're counting these all as 1 unit because they're happening at the same time. Now, what would happen if we started taking some of these out? Let's take out just a couple here and there. It gives it a bit of a bouncier feel, but let's not just do that. Let's actually add in some that are closer together. And we're looking at a 16th note grid. Suddenly it gets bouncier and bouncier, and it might make sense to even do a similar rhythm with our next chord, but What I want to do, if I want this rhythm to be exact, it actually becomes very easy to do now that we understand the principles of rhythm. We notice that this comes in at the 16th note before beat 2. So if I want to repeat this exact same rhythm on this chord in the second bar, then I need another chord, the 16th note before beat 2. And then we have, oh, that lands on beat 2. Okay, we're going to land here on beat 2. This lands on the halfway point between beat 2 and beat 3. Let's find that halfway point and put that in there. And what I'm doing by demonstrating this, it might seem obvious, I guess, but I'm trying to have you look at these different beats and bars, especially if we look at a singular bar, look at them as individual units that can now be copied. Beat 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the same as beat 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here in this bar. So if you do want to repeat something, great, you can easily do that now that you understand these subdivisions. Or conversely, if you want to make something different, like if you want to add more hits in here or something, you can do that as well. And sometimes just a little bit of variation in your rhythm from bar to bar is enough to make it sound thematic, but also interesting by just adding little variations there in the rhythm. So we took what was a very basic, like a whole note chord progression and turned it into something a little bit bouncier. Now, that doesn't mean there's not room to do things like big whole note chord progressions. Many ballads have that. I mean, a lot of even faster paced songs have that. But you want to make sure you're doing things deliberately. If you want to have a bit of a bounce, use that smaller grid so you can start getting into 8th and 16th notes, and use space so you can create a bit of a bounce. There doesn't have to be a note on every single spot. And actually, having notes extend like this can actually fundamentally change the characteristics of your rhythm. Let's just listen back to how this sounds. That sounds distinctly different than this. So use note length and the rate of your notes to create different feels in your music. Now I'm going to show you one more slightly more advanced subject before we leave here today. I'm going to show it in the drums. Now for the most part here, working in the 4/4 time signature with 4 beats per bar, we're dividing everything super evenly, 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. But sometimes we might want to divide things a little bit differently and have a different feel. And one common way to do this is by using triplets. We have an option for triplet grid here. So we're actually going to have the ability to now divide in triplets. And you'll notice, just take a look at these lines, everything before was divided super evenly. And it still is, if we look at the bar. Everything's still divided exactly how it was, nice and steady. But you notice we have some of these lines now. These are our 8th note triplets. And what you notice is what has happened, our bar has been divided into 3. So I'm going to delete the rest of these hi-hats and let's see what a triplet hi-hat pattern sounds like. I think you'll probably recognize it. It doesn't really go with our kick and snare at this point, so I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to stop our chord progression for now too. Now let me turn on the metronome so you can actually hear what time is. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. So now we have a triplet feel. A lot of the times, like I'm just going to put a kick on the downbeat here so we can get rid of the metronome. A lot of the times we use these in combination with 8th notes or stutters. So let me throw a couple notes there. We can achieve like a swung feel by doing this as well. This is just a different way of dividing our bars. And we not only have access to 8th note triplets, but we can also do 16th note triplets. So let's actually fill this in and see what this sounds like. And this often comes into play, especially when doing things like stutters. So let me jump back to an eighth note grid, turn the triplet grid off, and let's use these in combination. Let's just use it. Actually, let's do 16ths and 16ths. Let's just do a combination of triplets. And again, it's just about a different feel, how we move to the music. So let's just add a few more bars in of just straight ahead 16ths. So we'll kind of alternate here. So maybe you've heard something similar to this. It almost sounds like a wheel of fortune spinning and slowly slowing down. So this is just one example of sort of how we break those main rules of dividing rhythm up evenly by like even numbers. We can also divide it evenly by, threes and using triplets. And, that's an example of that. So if you hear a feel that is not quite on the grid, it feels a bit off, feels a bit wonky, maybe it feels a bit swung, it's likely that you're hearing some form of triplet. And hopefully now you can go ahead and achieve that in your music. One last thing, I want you to avoid this mistake that I see a lot. Let's say we are working with our little 1-bar phrase here. And I say, all right, I need you to copy the first 4 beats of bar 1 and paste it at bar 4. Well, if you do this and you highlight this much and you only copy this much, you're not actually copying all 4 beats. You went up to the 4th beat line, but you didn't copy the 4th beat. I mean, count it out. Beat 1, beat 2, beat 3. You only have 3 beats highlighted. Beat 4 is here. I see this mistake a lot. Think of it like a candy bar. If I say, I'm gonna give you 4 beats and I count 1, 2, 3, oh, there's the 4. That's 4. That's not 4 pieces of candy bar. You would be mad. Make sure you just are using that entire 4-beat phrase there. All right, so that was a preliminary look at rhythm. I hope that was helpful for you, and I hope you're able to take some of these concepts, apply them to your own music, and I hope you're able to start noticing some of these rhythmic concepts in the music that you love so that you can now go apply it to your own music. Let me know if this was helpful in a comment down below. We have one more installment of this music theory series to go for the year, so if you have suggestions, things you want me to tackle for that, please let me know in a comment. I would love to hear about your experience throughout this series if it has helped. But more to come on this, so make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, don't forget to give the video a like. All the links you need from me are in the description, social media, I share a lot of beats on Instagram and things like that, so check all that out. But thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.